This is William Klein, a man who spent his life refusing to be pigeonholed.
I have film. I'm ready to go.
He's a pioneer of 20th century photography. His raw, dramatic images of 50s New York helped create the art of street photography.
His pictures are like a fist in the face, coming straight at you. You were not going to miss them.
This one book has probably been the most influential photographic book ever published.
And these are his striking and hugely influential fashion images. He's made countless films, including the first ever documentary about Muhammad Ali.
I predict that tonight somebody will die that rains out from shock.
Controversial political films.
Napalm.
And his classic satire of the fashion world, Who Are You, Polly Magoo?
Divine.
It's hard to believe that that same person is capable of such beauty, at the same time be so powerful and angry.
Today, at the age of 84, Klein still displays an enviable lust for life.
I'm a New Yorker, you know. I was able to bullshit all these guys. I can still do it, you know.
And now, an acclaimed retrospective at Tate Modern is celebrating Klein's dazzling range of work over a career of more than 60 years. In the months leading up to the exhibition, I caught up with William Klein, back on the streets of his native New York and in his home city of Paris, to try to understand his unique creative vision through the eyes of the man himself.
With a wide-angle lens, I'm going to look great.
William Klein is one of the great Americans in Paris. After the war, he did his army service in Europe and moved to France, where he fell madly in love with Janine, who would be by his side for over 50 years. Throughout his life, he's worked regularly on both sides of the Atlantic, but Paris is home. After Janine died 7 years ago, he's lived here alone in a grand top-floor apartment.
What's that you've got? Is that your team?
This is the Yankees. I'm against the Yankees. I was against the Yankees in the old days. Now I'm sort of mellowing.
What do you miss about New York?
The great restaurants.
You're not.
I'm kidding.
I was going to say.
I don't give a shit about New York restaurants.
You don't.
Thanks to a US government scholarship for ex-soldiers, William was able to study in Paris as an artist.
No, Paris was the center of the art in the world, and I thought, you know, after the war, I would have a few bucks and I'd be able to live like a king in Paris. Go to La Coupole and clap Picasso and Giacometti on the shoulder. I thought that was the life.
Klein studied under the legendary French sculptor and painter Fernand Léger.
He was imposing. He was like Rocky Marciano or Lee Marvin. He was a big, husky Normandy peasant. And he spoke in very simple terms. He said, all you 20-year-old apprentice geniuses, you want to be well known, you want to get galleries, you want to meet collectors, you want to make money. That's bullshit.
Léger was one of the great pioneers of modern art. His work explored aspects of Cubism and Futurism, and also included extraordinary experimental films. His ambitious, multidisciplinary approach to art provided a vital inspiration to the young Klein.
To go to Leger and to see a real 100% artist, a great innovator and theoretician, it was great.
The early work that Klein produced was full of bold lines, rich colours, and a strong graphic eye that would appear throughout his work.
Okay.
So we're going to the studio.
Did you go to the Folie Bergère last time?
I wish.
Today is what, Thursday? Friday?
Yeah, it's Friday. Is it open on Friday?
They have a special Friday show.
In the Montparnasse district of Paris, William still pays regular visits to the studio he's been using for over 50 years. Here, everything is carefully curated, with Klein's trademark red and black branding.
Here we need more density.
The exhibition at Tate Modern is a few months away, and William's assistant, Pierre-Louis, is overseeing the preparations.
Something very light.
For William Klein, an exhibition is never just a retrospective, but a spectacle, with his images often printed on a grand scale.
C'est bien.
Among the work at Tate Modern will be some of his early experiments with light and photography.
You're very prescriptive about how your shows are done, how their exhibitions are mounted. And so, what was your concept for the Tate?
What was my hope and vision?
Yes.
A good show. Bravo, Pierre-Louis.
Will you be doing that at the Tate, Pierre-Louis? Is it performance art, this?
No, Pierre-Louis only does this in Paris. Let the Tate manage for themselves.
It's these abstract images that first brought William to the attention of Vogue magazine, after he produced a series of works based on painted panels that he'd made for an Italian architect.
I photographed the panels, and the light wasn't very good, so the exposure was long. And I had Jeanne, my wife, turn panels while I photographed, and I saw these geometrical forms which blurred. And I thought, well, maybe this is something new. And I had the idea that if I had a negative, I could do anything with it.
The renowned art director of Vogue, Alexander Lieberman, was struck by Klein's visual imagination and invited him to work for the magazine.
So he gave me a contract. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was like $100 a week, which at that time was
good money.
really good money.
So, despite his love of Paris, in 1954, with the financial support of Vogue magazine, he found himself back in New York. Here he created a groundbreaking visual portrait of the city, unlike anything that had gone before. A book of photographs that was not simply a collection of images, but more like a movie experience, with the pictures accompanied by Klein's own wry commentary.
New York is a monument to the dollar. The dollar is responsible for everything, good and bad. Everybody comes for it. No one can resist it.
What Klein did in the mid-50s was to take the language of things like tabloid newspapers, that very grainy, very black and white, very direct way of looking at the world. I think coming back, he really smelt the energy of New York and wanted to translate that through these very grainy, black and white, almost stream of consciousness images.
He had this eye that was kind of fearless. His pictures were raw, they were rugged, they were in your face. He seemed to have the courage to go forward rather than step backwards.
Klein's New York book, first published in the 1950s, is now one of the most collectible of all photography books. I've never seen the original of this book. I've only seen a version of it. It came with an ironic subtitle, Life is Good and Good for You in New York, and a playful, unconventional layout.
So here is a photograph that was taken on St. Patrick's Day, and all these guys are Irish. A lot of the people in my photograph either look at me, or there's always somebody to the side who's looking at the group and saying, what is this guy photographing? You know? It wasn't usual at that time. This is 1955, 54. It was kind of surprising for a lot of people to see me photographing them, you know.
The book takes the reader on a very personal journey around the neighborhoods of 50s New York.
Some 10,000 flourish in the several streets of Chinatown. About 80% are bachelors, average age 51. Many still have wives and children in China. Italian preteen club present baseball player card collection. My old neighborhood, a stickball team with girl cleanup hitter captain. Rare.
This is a pose photograph. This is in Little Italy. The dwarf was the mascot, and these guys played with the dwarf, you know, and the dwarf was there. They were proud to show me their mascot, and he was proud to be their mascot, and you know, I thought it was very unsavory and insulting, but they didn't.
To understand Klein's fascination with the streets that he photographed, I went with William back to the neighborhood where he grew up. How much affection do you have for New York?
I'm wondering, do I have an affection for New York? I tolerate New York.
You tolerate New York, you love Paris?
I love Paris. Let's go to the corner of 108th and Amsterdam.
That's the house where you lived?
That's the house I lived, and I'm pretty sure there's no plaque.
William Klein was born in 1928 to a Jewish immigrant family rocked by the impact of a great stock market crash.
My grandfather was a tailor, and he was successful. And then my father, who took it over, played the stock market in 1929, which wasn't a good time to play the stock market, and he lost everything. We had to move, and we were in a real dump on the west side.
The family were forced to move to a tough neighborhood not far from Harlem.
The good life and the crappy life are very often juxtaposed. There was a film that came out when I was in New York at that time called The Dead End Kids. And in this film you'd see an upscale apartment house, and right next to it was a slum where it was a matter of life and death to walk 5 blocks, you know. A real New York situation. I was brought up on the streets, part of a New York underclass. Here we are. Okay, thank you. A pilgrimage, 201, right?
201, that's it.
Hey, look at the door. The door is very chic, and the buttons. I just rang number 1. What do we have?
My friend William, thank you, used to live here, so we're trying to... He lived here many years ago.
What apartment? The first one here. That's kind of
That's a knock, all right.
people inside, they hear that, they think it's the police or the mafia.
There's no one home, but it doesn't seem to bother him too much.
I thought I saw a couple of girls.
I can see that William is a man always living in the moment.
You go to school down the block here?
Take him back to the place he was brought up, and there's no great nostalgia.
Can I ask you a question?
He's more curious about the people living here now.
Are there still cockroaches around?
I saw one maybe like last week, but I have a cat, so he took care of it.
Were you born here?
Yes,
In this house?
yes. My grandmother's been here for 40-somewhat years.
And you like this neighborhood?
It's home to me, it's all I know.
When Klein's family lived here, this was a poor community, hit hard by the Depression.
Tell me about your father. So when you came here, your father was sort of coming down market then when he came here?
He was moving down the ladder. And I guess I felt it was going down the scale of success in America. And I was not too excited.
During this period, in his early teens, William was already captivated by art, trekking across town to visit the Museum of Modern Art.
What made a boy of 13, 14 make his way to the Museum of Modern Art?
You know, it must be in my genes somewhere. I guess there was also an element of wanting to get out of a shitty place like this.
No dusty storehouse for old masters, this museum is an up-to-date showroom for the art of our time. Painting and sculpture, architecture and still photography, and the motion picture.
Art seemed to be, for me, a way of moving out, moving up. Listen, let's get out of this fucking place. Did you like my old house?
I liked the congeniality of the company we met there.
Yeah.
It was a real kind of community. And was it like that when you were there?
No. We're going up to Harlem.
Harlem was one of the neighborhoods that featured prominently in the New York book.
When you went there with the camera, did that give you a kind of excuse to be looking, do you think?
The camera was an excuse, yeah.
Horsing around in Harlem. Man, what do you want to take our picture for? Trying to escape the lens, but playful, a game.
A lot of people would say, are you crazy? You going up to Harlem? People that I would be more or less afraid of looking at directly. I felt at ease taking their photographs.
The whites never go to Harlem, never even think of it, for Harlem lies off limits, somewhere in the bad conscience of the city. New York time missed a beat here. Since the whites left Harlem, the clock stopped.
Despite the fact that he has some difficulty moving these days, William's eager to meet and talk to people on the street. With the help of our driver, John, we went to talk to the locals. I can only guess what he'd have been like in his prime, prowling the streets of New York.
Does he know what you know?
No, I know some of what he knows. You were, photographing in Harlem how many years ago?
Well, many years ago.
Many years ago.
Like how many years? The 60s, the 50s?
50s.
Oh, yeah? Who were the subjects you were photographing?
Just people.
Just people. Oh, all right.
I photographed the kids.
Close up. You could go into an empty lot in Harlem then. Tell the kids, move closer, hold it, look here, play the harmonica. You could do that then.
It was a real community. Everybody looked out for one another.
Yeah, in Harlem.
Yeah, everybody looked out for one another, you know. See, a lot of Caucasians, they were afraid to come to Harlem.
Yeah, right.
With all the movie stars, politicians, they used to come uptown to see our shows, you know.
And you guys couldn't get in?
Yeah, we used to go in the back. We have to go in the back. Yes.
William still carries his camera with him everywhere, and today is no exception.
You still got a good eye with it.
Yeah.
Yes, you have a good eye.
That's easy,
You
man.
know,
That's easy.
Yeah, that's what made you a good photographer, because you got a good eye.
A good eye.
Yes.
You need more than that.
The thing with Klein's New York is you start looking through, and it's the accumulation of these pictures which really counts. So by the end of it, you haven't just seen a collection of individual pictures, you've seen an accumulation which creates this noise, which gives off this energy, which reflects so accurately what was going on in New York in the mid-1950s.
Pseudo poster for the American dream. Italian cop, integrated Hispanic, Yiddish mama, African American lady plus beret, the melting pot.
Klein wasn't the only pioneering street photographer, but his harshly framed, often blurred and distorted pictures had a look that was entirely his own.
So this is a famous photograph which was used a lot. These kids were just play acting, and they weren't as
threatening,
as tough as they look. I asked them to look tough, and for me it's a self-portrait. Because I also played on the street with guns, and but I was also sort of angelic. So I was both of them.
You know you're not supposed to smoke on the BBC, William. You're not used to doing what you're told, are you?
These contrasting sides to Klein's personality, the straight-talking street kid and the sensitive artist, are a key to understanding the richness of his work.
This has been grueling.
I sense that rawness in his makeup. You know, I know for a fact he doesn't suffer fools gladly, that, you know, you mustn't upset him. So there is an emotional quickness and rawness about him as a person, and it definitely comes across in his photography.
Get your camera out of my face. Unusual, but okay.
Klein developed a language which was at the time incredibly radical and unique. I mean, now we see it all the time. In fact, every time we do see it, they are in fact children of Klein.
His distinctive style has influenced generations of photographers around the world, including the leading Japanese photographer Daido Moriyama, whose work is being shown alongside Klein's at Tate Modern. And for one legendary British photographer, Klein's example was an inspiration.
It was completely in your face, the way he worked. And that's what attracted, you know, him to me. I thought, this is the kind of man I would like to be. This is the way my photography has to be. No half measures, straight in.
You look at Klein's work and you believe you're looking at reality. There's a strong sense of composition, but then real life and randomness is allowed to come in and out of the frame.
Cashier in Broadway cinema, at home in her glass case on the sidewalk. She reads, dreams, phones, makes up, completely oblivious of the sidewalk audience.
As well as enigmatic moments fleetingly captured by Klein's camera, the book is full of scenes where the subjects are clearly very aware of what's going on.
I think some of his best pictures are a mix where you get a kind of gallery of characters in the shot, and some of them are clearly aware of what's going on and are playing up to the camera. And you feel this very collaborative theatre in the pictures.
John.
Yes. I'm getting my hair cut.
You're getting your hair shaved. That's not a haircut, that's a shave, man.
I'm getting my hair shaved.
You're a good man, William. The gods are with you. Why are you walking around with film? You gotta get with the times.
I like film. I'm old-fashioned.
William may seem old-fashioned in today's digital age.
I have film. I'm ready to go.
But when he began taking pictures, they were a radical departure from the work of many of his contemporaries, including the fabled Henri Cartier-Bresson.
Cartier-Bresson kept this distance, almost as if he was a ghost walking amongst the people of the streets of the world, you know, whereas Klein made no pretense that he was there and he was coming after you with that camera.
John, yes? Sing us some Placido Domingo.
The irony was, William took his pictures using a camera he'd bought from Cartier-Bresson.
It shows so ably and so well how photography can be so different with a different author and a different photographer behind the camera.
Excuse me, what's your name?
Ramona.
Ramona, are you going to cut my hair a little bit?
Yeah, I do now.
Okay.
Klein's New York images were obsessed not only with the people, but with how New York was a city constantly selling itself. This was the age of Mad Men, the birth of advertising, and Klein's images brought a satirical eye to a city in which people were drowning in the big sell.
Advertising today is mainly grotesque. Such a conspiracy has developed between advertiser and public that it's become a gag. The public is grateful, yaks, and goes along.
Vogue never printed his photographs. In fact, he couldn't find a publisher at all in America for his unfashionably gritty pictures. William, by then back in Paris, just thought they missed the point.
Je trouve d'abord que c'est réel. D'autre part, je pense qu'il y a une espèce de gaieté là-dedans, une gaieté qui est peut-être très proche de l'humour des ghettos juifs. Enfin, devant la catastrophe, il y a toujours ces rires.
John, do you know where we're going? Yes. Good. Oh, look at this. What's going on?
When he was starting, Klein was one of a small group of pioneers documenting the streets around them.
This Times Square?
Yeah.
Now, the urge to capture everything with a camera is a mainstream obsession.
Everyone's got a camera now, you know this?
Everybody. Oh, that's the thing. What's amazing is that all these people who buy a camera, they start using it, and what they do are the most avant-garde things that no professional cameraman would dare to do.
In 1958, still experimenting with new ways of documenting New York, William picked up a film camera and came here to Times Square, where over a period of nights, he shot a remarkable short film, Broadway by Light. His mesmerizing, beautifully scored meditation on a city enthralled to the consumer image is regarded by many as an early pop art classic.
When I did Broadway by Light, I had a tripod and a small Arriflex. And the people who came by and saw me filming it, 11 o'clock at night, the freezing cold, they would look at the camera and the tripod and say, "Hey man, you got a great camera, man." But they never asked me what I was filming or why.
I got visitors from the FBI who came by and said, "We want you to make a film that glorifies America." And I said, okay.
Really?
No. No, but I did it a little bit in that spirit, because a lot of people said, you know, you're doing a book so dark and black and anti-American. And I said, well, I'll do something which is going to be beautiful in color, which would also talk about consumerism and selling. So it was a conscious effort to continue my diatribe against America, but in candy-colored heaven.
You call it a diatribe, but there's something very playful about what you do
Oh,
as well.
it's a hymn to America, a hymn to money, a hymn to commerce. It's a hymn to what is the most beautiful thing in New York.
So what was it like when you came here all those years ago? When you put your tripod up, where did you put it?
When I did this film a million years ago, right here. But it was like a living room, you know, because all the walls were covered, and it's very intimate and gemütlich.
Comfortable, gemütlich.
Yeah, really.
This is the interesting thing about Klein's vision of New York. There's a warmth, but also an edge, which seems to capture the city, its people, and the one thing they've always had in common.
Everybody in New York thinks they're special. They all felt that they were entitled to be famous, and they thought they deserved to be photographed.
Yeah, they were all complicit in those pictures that you took.
Yeah, they were.
They wanted to be part of it. They wanted to pose.
Klein's portrait of the city has attitude and energy, fueled as always by his mischievous sense of humour.
You took a picture with that?
Yeah.
Let's have a look.
That's quite fun.
It's all right.
Throughout this period, William was still being paid by Vogue magazine, and it wasn't long before he was persuaded to take fashion photographs, quickly bringing the same invention and originality that his Vogue mentor, Alex Lieberman, had first spotted in his early work.
Alex Lieberman was always looking for the kind of energy and the kind of immediacy of a news photograph, which was one reason that I think Bill's photography appealed to him so much, was because it did have that sense of action.
I think what's exceptional about William's work is that every single image is so powerful. He's not satisfied with the ordinary. He's only interested in the extraordinary.
Where Klein's New York photos had been up close and in your face, many of his fashion images adopted new techniques, experimenting with telephoto lenses, mirrors, and some of the darkroom trickery he'd learnt in his youthful Paris days. But he hadn't lost his passion for the street and for all the drama and confrontations it offered.
Bill was much more interested in photography than in fashion. He was not the only photographer who did photographs out of doors, but Bill was the only one who put the girls into amazing situations, like standing around in the middle of the traffic or climbing on statues or in and out of fountains. And the more difficult the situation, the better he liked it.
Vous restez le même côté des choses. Vous occupez pas de. C'était pas mal quand vous l'avez juste au-dessus de la tête. Faites ça. Regardez le bas.
Très bien. J'y vais.
Soyez sage.
At the Tate exhibition, one of Klein's most iconic fashion images is now taking pride of place.
Here we are.
Here we are, we're
in Rome.
Piazza di Spagna.
I was doing a story for Vogue on the fashion collections in Rome, and I was shown these two dresses. And I said, oh, I know we'll do that. We'll do it in the pedestrian crossing at the Piazza di Spagna. So I had these girls walking back and forth doing double takes because they had more or less the same dress. I was up on the steps of the Piazza d'Espagna and I was experimenting.
So you were on a telephoto, is that right?
It's a telephoto, yes, you see everything is flattened out.
Yeah. And they couldn't see you, of course, so they didn't know what was going on.
Nobody could see me. I was halfway up the steps and these men didn't understand because they thought they were hookers, you know. So they walked up, you know, started feeling their ass, and the editor from Vogue started panicking, and she said, "We're going to create a scandal, so we have to stop."
I was on the sidewalk, biting my nails, terrified that the police was going to turn up because traffic was beginning to slow, men were beginning to congregate, the whole thing was getting a little fraught. Bill was laughing his head off, but that was kind of typical of the way we worked on location.
I like these situations where things just developed.
Did this picture cause quite a sensation when it came out?
All the photographic stores were besieged by photographers buying telephoto lenses for their fashion shoots. And I think it's a good idea. I still think it's a good idea.
While his New York images feel like a very real portrait of the city, his fashion images constantly play with the idea of reality, drawing attention to their artifice.
I'm not so sure that William actually likes fashion. He always says to me he can take it or leave it. And he says the difference is that when he's working on reportage on his own, he's capturing a moment in time that he can't control. And I think he gets very excited by that. But when he's working in fashion, it tends to be he has assistants, there's sets. It's about imagery and creating a more playful idea.
Because he understood how to create a powerful picture, he created a lot of very iconic fashion pictures. Great photographers like Avedon Penn, Klein, they establish their ideas, and then the fashion world comes along and sort of takes them and uses them. And that's perfectly fine because, you know, you reap the reward of being very well paid, and it means your work can go more mainstream.
William is still in touch with some of his models, and in New York, he caught up and reminisced with one of his favorites, Dorothy McGowan.
This is Dorothy again.
This? You see, I'm standing on a platform. I fell down.
Did he care?
I think he felt like a jerk, and I was very angry. I had to go to the doctor. He got so involved in his work, he forgot that I was real.
Dorothy was one of the supermodels of her day, but Klein's energetic, spontaneous style was a world away from what she'd been used to.
With Bill, it was crazy. And we had a lot of fun. We laughed, and nobody came near us because they just stayed away. There were no rules, at least as far as he was concerned. And that's a little shocking to some people. Hey, tough.
How is this background created?
I would take a flash, and I had an assistant with lights, and he would go around the silhouette, put it over her head, do this, and it looks like a Japanese ideogram.
Yeah, I love that. And
But-
sometimes we had the flash ourselves, and we created our own, like
So
here.
she didn't know.
Oh, you're so full of baloney. Here, I created my own flash. I'm almost sure.
All you did was hold out your hand for this big check.
A
And
big
this is-
check? Are you kidding? From Vogue? Think again.
She was very funny because it's
Seeing William and Dorothy together, you can tell how the teasing quality of the pictures is right there in his relationship with his models.
I never kissed any model. I was the only one who never flirted with the model. True?
Well, I can no, that's not true. But you
Prac-
were
practically.
very.
What do you mean that's not true?
You know, well, first of all, you were much cuter than a lot of the photographers, and it was very clear that you and Janine were very clearly a couple. There was nowhere to go with you. You understand? You were a man who was married, and you were happily married.
We were.
In 1966, after nearly a decade taking fashion pictures, William made his first feature film, Who Are You, Polly Magoo, casting Dorothy as a young fashion model making her way in the business in a witty parody of a celebrity-obsessed media.
Qui suis-je?
Oui!
Je suis Polly Magoo. Mais entre nous, je ne suis pas sûre de pouvoir vous répondre.
What was it about the fashion world that intrigued you so much?
The film is not about fashion, it's about media. And fashion is part of media. It's also something that is pretty funny, graphic, and inventive. And I thought, let's do a film on fashion.
Et ça fait des millions de fois que vous m'avez prise en photo. Et chaque fois qu'on me prend en photo, il reste un peu moins de moi. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'il peut bien me rester à la fin?
We were all pressed into service. Bill was doing this film on a shoestring. Janine, his wife, did the costumes. I mean, the whole thing was done for fun.
My rate for Vogue was $75 a day.
Yeah.
My rate for Polly Magoo was $6 a day.
$6 a day.
Talk about
Top rate then.
$6 a day?
$6.
I can't believe that you got so much.
Oh, you're so full of baloney.
Vous comprenez, nous posons la question, est-ce que Paris est mort? C'est-à-dire la haute couture, vous comprenez?
Oui, madame.
It was supposed to be a spoof, a send-up, but unfortunately, the editor-in-chief of American Vogue at the time was not amused.
Ce n'est pas possible. Et son maquillage?
To many of those in the know, it was all too obvious who had inspired the film's larger-than-life fashion editor.
Divine. Divine.
The fashion editor was, of course, based on Diana Vreeland and her way of making pronouncements, like shocking pink is the navy blue of India, or think pink.
L'ingénieur du gêneux, le magicien des mollets, le géomètre des cuisses, l'architecte des reins.
Did you actually intend that to be Diana Vreeland?
Oh, it was Diana Vreeland. No doubt about that. Except that nobody ever made fun of her.
J'ai une idée.
While fashion was paying the bills, Klein's love of the street remained undiminished. Among the many striking images at the Tate exhibition are pictures from Klein's critically acclaimed books on Moscow, Tokyo and Rome.
In Rome, all seems pregnant with meaning. Men look tormented. They watch each other, and they're watched by uniformed carabinieri. Via del Corsa, worried passerby. What goes on? Nothing.
Sometimes they look like film stills. Sometimes they look like these snapped moments where a photographer has kind of whipped around and taken a picture very quickly. But they're all too well composed to really be like that. They're unbelievably taut, organized frames.
By the end of his travels, Klein had turned street photography into a remarkable art form.
1961, Moscow. May Day, Red Square. Facing me, Lenin, Marx, Engels, and the traditional parade. In the foreground, several comrades from the KGB.
I think with his set of city books, Klein developed a language which was at the time incredibly radical and unique. And this has spawned many imitators, and it had a profound effect on the photography world.
The subtle detail in his pictures comes partly from intuition, but also a smart technical awareness of how to get that something extra. As he showed me back at Tate Modern.
This girl is there in a bikini on the beach along the Moscow River, and that's probably her father or her grandfather, and her mother in the background. And what's interesting is that this is a wide-angle lens. And so I would aim the camera at her, and she thinks I'm obsessed with her, she's the center of the world, but she doesn't realize I see things happening behind her. And so it's a family portrait.
Well, yes, it's a family portrait.
Every photograph, I look at the contact, and it brings back memories of everything, how I was feeling, tired or full of beans. Photography is like that.
I'm a champ! I'm the real champ!
With his talent for taking photographs that looked like film stills, Klein was keen to continue his own adventures in film. And as luck would have it, there was one man he seemed born to collaborate with, Muhammad Ali. His 1964 film, Cassius the Great, takes us incredibly close to the young superstar in the making, and includes the memorable and often replayed encounter of Ali and the Beatles. But it was a typical mix of luck and charm that gave William such privileged access.
I went down from New York to Miami, and there was an empty seat on the plane, and I recognized the guy sitting next to this empty seat. It was Malcolm X. And I said, "Is this seat free?" And he said, "Yeah." And I sat down next to him, and we hit it off. Malcolm X was a very cool, intelligent guy, and he was curious about a Jewish filmmaker from New York. And he said, "Oh, I'll give you a hand," you know, and he let the word out that I was okay. And I went to Clay's camp, and I was immediately accepted.
Jabbing and left hooking, jabbing and left hooking. Yeah, I'm a pretty fighter. I don't get it. See how pretty and smooth I am? I don't get cut or marked. I'm something new.
Klein's documentary about Ali is an almost forgotten classic. It doesn't just portray the boxing legend right at the start of his career. It explores what the story had to say about the racial tensions of the time. In one scene, he brilliantly choreographs the wealthy white men who controlled the young fighter as they introduce themselves to camera.
I'm W.L. Lyons Brown, chairman of the board of Brown Forman Distillers Corporation. I'm also a farmer and in the oil business.
Worth Bingham, assistant publisher of the Courier-Journal and Louisville Times.
I'm William Cutchins, president of the Brown Williamson Tobacco Corporation.
The champ of the world! The champ of the world should be pretty like me!
He's found in Ali a perfect alter ego. You know, here's a guy that wants to do it his way, pugnacious, determined, super articulate, super smart. So Klein behind the camera is a perfect foil to Ali, the performer, in front of the camera.
People think we're crazy. Let them keep thinking. Listen, they're crazy. Let them keep thinking it. Listen, they're crazy. We are crazy.
Unsurprisingly, Ali relished what he saw.
He said, "Where's my film?" I said, "I brought it." And we went to his room, and he had steaks brought up and ice cream. And when the film was over, he wanted to see it again, you know? And we saw it 3 times.
How'd you let that give you a command? Ain't that a shame? Say your man.
Throughout the 1960s, Klein became increasingly politicized. Camera in hand, he documented the revolution on his doorstep.
ici qu'on ne juge pas les hommes par rapport à leur origine sociale, mais par rapport à leur filiation.
Filming the frenzy of debate and argument in Paris during the student occupations in 1968.
Nous n'aurons plus d'Équin, Ségui et toutes ces vieilles badernes à la tête.
But as always, it was unmistakably Klein's eye on events. The French filmmaker Chris Marker said of Klein's films that you could pick any frame and it would look like one of his photos. You can see what he meant. Elsewhere, Klein turned his camera on the Black Panthers, advocates of violent revolution.
Because who's interested in what the pigs of the mass media report, you know?
Showing his usual fearlessness, Klein gave a voice to their controversial leader, Eldridge Cleaver, on the run in Algeria from the FBI.
These pigs tried to kill me, shot me in my leg, and they were going to kill me. And the only reason that I'm not dead this minute, there were too many people who came out of their houses and started screaming at these pigs to stop.
But Klein's provocative political mischief-making caught up with him in the end. His contribution to the anti-war film Far From Vietnam would have serious repercussions for his career.
I knew that there was going to be the biggest anti-war rally ever in America. And I went to New York for that. And it was really worth it because for and against, there were hysterical pro-war people screaming, "Bomb Hanoi, bomb Hanoi."
It's kids like this that are getting burned up by napalm. Kids like this and this one and people like you, grown-up people, they're being burned up for no good reason at all.
Meanwhile, William was still taking fashion photos, and Far From Vietnam didn't go down well with his Vogue paymasters.
Napalm, nah.
And they said, now you're doing movies, you don't really need our contract, because my contract was, I lived on that contract.
Were you shocked by that, or did you?
I was pissed off.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't that much attached to Vogue, and I found it a little hard to do fashion photographs. It was a time when it was hard to be an American. We're driving in the richest city in the world, and all you've got is potholes.
Klein has continued making films and taking pictures in a maverick, fiercely independent career which spans more than half a century. Today, he's one of the most collected photographers in the world and still takes a close interest in new versions of his work, meeting up with his New York dealer to approve new prints of some of his most popular images.
I thought the interesting thing about this was all the mist and the steam atmosphere in the room. That must be quite hard to photograph.
We used cinema smoke floating around.
Made it interesting for me to print, I know that.
I asked them to pose a bit like fashion models. They were afraid that I'd be making fun of them. But when they saw the photograph, they thought they looked beautiful. And I think they look beautiful myself. And sexy.
As well as producing new prints, Klein's determination to constantly revisit his work has led him to paint the photographic contact sheets of some of his most iconic images, using his paintbrush to remind us of the way the perfect picture was once selected in a pre-digital age.
There's a William Klein aesthetic. It's a, multidisciplinary approach. I mean, it's exactly what you want to see. You do actually want to see an image maker exploring different ways of making images.
And at the Tate Modern exhibition, in one of the most dramatic rooms, these painted contacts are being displayed on a spectacular scale.
So there's your famous picture of the boy with the gun. And you decide to take the 2 frames, because that's the famous image.
2 frame, yeah, because everybody knows this photograph here. And then I'm showing 2 photographs. You see that these kids are posing for me, and they're laughing, actually.
Among the painted contacts is one of Klein's most famous images.
That was quite controversial when you took that picture the first time, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Her smoking a cigarette like that.
Well, smoking a cigarette like that, you know, for fashion you had to have a cigarette holder and gloves. And this was published in all the Vogues except American Vogue.
They didn't publish it in American Vogue because...
She's smoking like a sailor, not elegant.
And was she supposedly modeling that hat?
Yeah, that was the idea. I was doing hat shots.
What happened to her?
She died, she had a cancer.
What was her
name? Evelyn Tripp. But you know, in those days, people didn't know the names of models. Models were not stars with names. Today they're like movie stars.
William continues to take pictures of the next generation of fashion stars. His imaginative eye still highly prized as a way of getting noticed in today's image-saturated world. In recent years, he's been a regular contributor to the American fashion magazine Harper's Bazaar.
He has a way of showing fashion. It's almost because he doesn't care that he produces something that is so extraordinary.
At the opening night of the Tate Modern Show, William plays the role of genial host, enjoying a bit of high-speed mingling. But, as ever, he's always camera in hand, documenting the moment. Now well into his 80s, William Klein is one of the last survivors of a generation who shaped the art of 20th century photography.
Let me chop it, let me chop it, let me chop it.
And he shows no sign of giving up.
He's got such a strength about him. You can't imagine getting on his wrong side, but at the same time, you know he's a real softie.
You look handsome now.
You did a miracle.
You look handsome.
He's just one of a kind.
You got a good haircut.
There are no rules in creativity. You know, Klein recognized that from the word go.
Take my picture.
I think all photographers have got this streak of energy in them that other people don't seem to have.
I'm up here. What are you photographing? Okay, thank you. 3. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. William, look at you. You're looking good, right?
I don't look good.
After a creative life spanning over 60 years, his passion for making images remains as strong as ever, as does his determination to do things his way.